All right, everyone, the DNC is really screwing itself. The Democrats, for the second election in the row, just fucking can't walk the tightrope line in a schismatic proceeding, which is what they're in, between the left and sort of like independent people, further left, the grassroots movements. They can't really strike the balance between that and the party loyal, like the partisan, and also the fundraising apparatus, the DCCC and various donors and lobbies. They can't seem to find their footing. What they've done with the 7th Dem debate, the next one that they're going to host, the entire stage is going to be white people. Now, do I see this as problematic? No, inherently not. Kamala dropped out. Andrew Yang hasn't hit the fundraising threshold, I believe, or is it the polling threshold? If you don't hit the threshold, then, there's no reason to let you in. I would point out, despite the money involved, Bloomberg won't be on the debate stage. Apparently he will be discluded too, and he's in 5th place. Klobuchar will be, though. She polls at half of his average, but he doesn't have enough individual donors because he's self-funded. The DNC has decided to stop self-funded candidates from going forward too. Essentially, in order to be at the debate, you have to have a significant amount of individualistic support, so you can't be like the FDR wouldn't get on the debate stage, I guess. And you have to be polling at a certain level in cherry-picked polls. This keeps people like Gabbard and Yang out anyway. Apparently, for even Bloomberg, this could be a problem. So there will be 6 people up on stage, despite the fact that you can comfortably accommodate 7 or 8. You could easily ease the rules and say, okay, well, we're going to get Yang on the stage because, he's polling at 3.5. That's high enough, and he's got almost enough donors, so fuck it. He would have qualified for the last debate and did, by the way, at the time. They decided to raise the threshold to, 225,000 individual donors and a certain number from a certain number of states plus a certain polling average in a certain number of polls. But the problem is they cherry-pick the polls. They've done this over and over to keep Gabbard out of the debates. And we know that that's exactly why. They're terrified. If Gabbard gets up on stage and destroys Elizabeth Warren, their backup in case Biden goes kaput is gone. Then at that point, probably you get candidate Bernie Sanders, who would get completely curb-stomped by Trump. I have faith, by the way, that the American people see past his snake oil. And I'd work 10 times harder, too, just to try to prevent him from getting elected, too. Yes, I would absolutely have more skin in the game because I don't want Vermont to be a laughingstock. In fact, by the way, and I'm going to be making a little bit of a movement for this, I'm going to call upon everyone and their mother. If you're in the United States, especially in an open primary state, take a ballot and vote for Joe Biden. It'd be hilarious to watch him stammer his way through the debates with Trump, and let's face it, he wouldn't win. 0% chance, pretty much. He doesn't even know what stage he's on half the time. Get Biden up on stage would be hilarious, and also he's ultimately, at least, aside from the dementia, at least he's sane. Bernie Sanders would make my state look like shit, so I don't want him to be the nominee. Doesn't even matter what platform he stands for. Doesn't help that he's almost an octogenarian who just had a heart attack. I think that might be a recipe for disaster politically. What do you think? So, we've got the debate stage set. Joe Biden will be there. So, old, white, career politician, rich dude. Bernie Sanders will be there. Old, white, career politician. Still rich, although not quite as. He's not Joe Biden rich, but he's still a millionaire. Elizabeth Warren. Old white person, also rich, career politician since the 80s. Oh, but she's female, so this is unique. Buttigieg, well, he's younger and he's also gay, so he's the minority up on stage, I guess, according to the Democrat standards. He's only middle-aged, so he's a spring chicken. They don't exactly have a Joe Kennedy up on stage to save him. Klobuchar, she's like 50-something, so she's in like the proper age range, and also another female, but again, she's white. And then who's the other one that's going to be up on stage? I don't know. You've got Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg who's in 4th place, Bloomberg's out, Klobuchar is up. Oh, Steyer, that's right. Here's the real joke. You want to hear the real joke? Tom Steyer will be up on stage. Another rich, white, old billionaire. Instead of Bloomberg. See, Steyer has been in long enough that I guess he just passed the threshold for individual donors, whereas Bloomberg didn't. What about the polling results, though? There is no way that you can possibly construe Tom Steyer as a viable candidate. They're saying, well, we're going to make it, you have to cross one of these thresholds in order to be in the debate so that we make sure that it's people that are relevant to the public's interest. Tom Steyer is not relevant to anybody's interest. You can't even remember. Nobody even knows he's in the race. He's just he's exactly like Bloomberg, only without Bloomberg's polling numbers and name recognition. The fact that he's still in at this point is a fucking farce. The fact that he's been on every debate stage is a fucking farce. The problem for the Democrats is this. They can put in what procedures they want. Whatever threshold they want to have. They can make any arbitrary number. They can have a debate stage that's just Joe Biden based on the fact that the new entry requirement is you have to poll above 25% in the RCP aggregate. They could do that. Would it be a good idea to do that? No. Is it a good idea to alienate the 3.5% of the party that really likes Andrew Yang? No, it's not. And I don't like the dude either. I would never vote for him, and I think he's completely out there and nuts. But that being said, by any standard definition, he's ahead of Klobuchar and way ahead of Steyer, and yet he's not on stage. Gabbard should be up on stage. Her core fan base is, at this point, hardened enough and large enough so that there's no excuse for not having her up on the debate stage. She's been now twice denied a slot there, despite the fact that in RCP, the first time, she easily surpassed the polling requirements. She has enough individual donors. She has the polling numbers to have technical viability. She's a point ahead of Steyer and yet not there, and she's not that far behind Klobuchar, who's herself slightly behind Andrew Yang. And as for Bloomberg not being on stage, the dude is polling at 6%. He's polling at almost twice Klobuchar's numbers. And the fact that he's self-funded and therefore doesn't need to e-beg for individual donations shouldn't keep him from the debate stage. What cherry pick? Here's what I'm not understanding. The DNC said you had to surpass one of these two thresholds to be on the debate stage. Either a certain amount of donations from a certain amount of people in a certain amount of states. That's the grassroots route. Or a certain polling number in cherry pick polls. How is it that they managed to choose polls that precluded Bloomberg, of all people, being at the polling number he's at? You don't have to like him. I certainly don't. You don't have to intend to support him. I never would. There is no way in hell you can argue the point that you're not cherry-picking the polls if a person who's polling at 5 or 6% is kept off stage and a dude at 1.2% is on. You can't possibly make that argument. It's not rational in any way, shape, or form. What polls is the DNC using is my question. By the way, I want to see the polling firms that the DNC uses. And then I want somebody to run an aggregate on those same polling firms' numbers for things like Trump's approval, the Democrats' standings altogether. I bet it would give you a wonky number that would be really far off what RCP gives you. And they can't possibly argue that alienating between 10 and 20% of the electorate is a good idea. Even some of the fans of the upper tier candidates want some of these other people on stage. It's beginning to get a little bit weird to people, I think. They're like, well, you've got this debate going. You've got this dude at 3.5 who's not on stage, but you've got a dude at 1.2 who is. Who nobody's ever heard. Nobody knows who Tom Steyer is. The idea that if you get him up on stage with fewer candidates and he gets 5 minutes to talk uninterrupted, that's magically going to launch him into the stratosphere and he'll be at 5%, I think is lunacy at this point. The number of people who have already basically solidified behind a candidate at this point has got to be well beyond 50%. Most people already know who they want as their first choice candidate. Most people. Now, of course, there's a lot of defaulting. Most of those people won't get their wish. Even if Joe Biden drops out, a third of the electorate doesn't get its wish. They have to find somebody else, and we don't necessarily know who they default to and in what numbers. Most people will be let down because nobody has over 50% of the support right now. But you'd think that the DNC could try a little bit to keep, the schismatic stuff at bay. But they're not really trying. They appear to have deliberately formulated their rules in such a way that many people will be pissed off at them regardless of what happens. If you're a Yang fan or a Gabbard fan, or if you're a Bernie fan and Biden ends up the nominee at this point, let's face it, you're going to feel schlonged. And that's going to be, by the way, used as a main attack strategy by the Republicans regardless of who the nominee is. They will look for arguments to make that the person was essentially coronated, that they weren't not elected by the little people, that essentially the DNC foisted them on the public. This will be the case regardless of who the nominee is, by the way. And their arguments are probably prefabricated at this point. All right, they already know what they're going to say based on who's the nominee. Some of those attacks will land, and the DNC is handing them arrows for their quiver. The DNC is practically re-electing Trump at this point. The DNC and Bloomberg especially, I've said, Bloomberg, by keeping Buttigieg out of the winner's circle, has probably fucked the Democrats anyway. The DNC can't even get the bridle on its own party straight right now. The DNC and the DCCC now as well, sparring with some of its own members, namely AOC. Make her the face of the Democratic Party. See how well that works. It worked so well for your polling before. That's about all. Peace out.